Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of the Go Roy podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kel Quinn, and joining me today is Phil De Bruyne from the Beyond the Pitch My United podcast. How's it going, Phil?
Oh, good, mate. No complaints. Thanks for having me.
Well, no complaints except for the fact that United got another drubbing at Vicarage Road, and it led to Solskjaer being dismissed, which is probably overdue. Yeah, like you said, we don't agree with the abuse that he's been getting by some fans, but the criticism was warranted, and his position really did become untenable. And finally, the board did act and get rid of him. And my only issue is that they've kept all his coaching staff, and for me, they were part of the problem. I don't think Ollie should have been scapegoated here. I think Phelan, Carrick, and McKenna all should have went as well. But I do understand that somebody has to take training in the interim until somebody comes in. So, what was your thoughts on the game, and what's your thoughts on Solskjaer's dismissal?
Well, I think, first of all, the game was just another confirmation that Solskjaer isn't turning this around. If he was, he would have already. I think by the time we'd reached Watford, even all these staunchest supporters, and I'm one of them, had accepted that this is, really at a point where it needs to change. And it was really at a point where it was going to be a bigger story if Ollie turned it around than getting sacked. I have to say, I'm very, very upset. This is not analogous to Mourinho being sacked. It's totally different. Jose Mourinho didn't score a winner in a European Cup final. I don't know why this is difficult for people to understand. I mean, there's people really think that Boca Juniors would mourn the loss of, Martin Palermo in the same way they would with Diego Maradona. Clearly not, right? Clearly that not everyone's equal and not everyone means the same to supporters for obvious reasons. Solskjaer was not Mourinho. He treated the club with the utmost respect to the very end. Never blamed the club, never blamed the players, took full responsibility, never turned around and said it was the players' fault, it was the other team with better players, it was this fault, her fault, his fault, and then when they win, it was all me. The guy treated the club with the utmost respect. And there's nothing wrong with criticism. Criticism in the public sphere in Europe and in a job like Manchester United comes with the territory. But what I will say is two things. The abuse is utterly disgusting. And quite frankly, I wish the people who abuse Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would fuck right off and never attach themselves to support his football club again. None of them deserve any level of success. They spoiled, petulant children. Forget my language. And then there's the other people that sit right in the middle that are like, well, I'm not going to abuse him, but you're going to tolerate the abuse. See, I don't do that. So if you're going to abuse that man, if you cross that line and you abuse him, you don't work with me. I don't have anything to do with you. I won't do your podcast. I won't do anything to do with you. I have nothing to do with you. Right? Quite frankly, I find it utterly despicable. A man who scored a winner in a European Cup final for his football club, a man who's shown ridiculous loyalty to his football club and didn't have to in the 90s when Solskjaer could have won anywhere in the world. It was more important for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to sit on a Manchester United bench than it was to sit in someone else's shirt, making a lot more money, playing every week. That guy scored a winner in a European Cup final, and he's going to be abused by scroats online that have nothing to do with his football club. I'm not having that. I'm sorry. He handled himself with dignity to the very end, and the only thing he's guilty of is not being good enough. I'll take that in life, right? Because he wasn't guilty of treachery. He didn't betray the football club. He didn't do anything. He conducted himself with class and dignity, and I'm telling you, he leaves a better football club behind than the one he inherited, right? I can easily see someone coming in with that squad and turning things around. But finally, these players, these treacherous bastards, absolute treasonous pieces of shit, right? They got him the sack too. Now, the only thing that's consistent since 2013 is the people above Solskjaer. Clearly, there's an environment at Old Trafford where these players don't fear failure and don't fear the consequences of failure, the way you would have in another top club that prioritizes football and success. In the last couple of weeks, he's got Paul Pogba and Harry Maguire sent off. Two players he should be able to rely on. Two people who let him down probably more than anyone. Two people. Paul Pogba, Solskjaer rescued his career, right? And that's what he does to him, right? Keane was right. Absolutely bang on, right? Jesse Lingard, the night before United's biggest game, he's doing this with a West Ham shirt. It's a disgrace. So make sure whenever people are casting the finger of responsibility and blame, those arseholes that that pointed solely at Solskjaer, quite frankly, I despise them, because it isn't just his problem. It goes way beyond him. The man's thoroughly decent. The man done everything he could to bring success to Manchester United. And unfortunately, there's people attached to this football club who'll be rubbing their hands at the shiny new toy until, right, he's not their favourite guy, and they spoil petulant children. I want my guy, or I don't support Manchester United. Fuck off, then.
Ironically, in Solskjaer's last game, the player that stood out for Man United was Donny van der Beek, the player that Solskjaer didn't really give a chance to. I thought he was fantastic.
Hold on, on that there. He has to earn a chance. This is not recreational soccer where everyone gets equal playing time. This is the biggest football club in the world. Yes, he played well. How many times did he play well before that?
I would just want to make the point that he was playing consistently between Fred and McTominay, who are not good enough at this level. He should have given somebody else a go rather than push this with those two players.
Wait a minute on that topic. Fred McTominay, I would say Fred, who plays who's a stalwart in the Brazil national team. So clearly he's good enough at this level, right? Whether he's good enough in the system he's being asked to play, that's a different question, right? Secondly, if you watch him, it's clearly a system issue rather than a Fred issue, because he's constantly isolated. In fact, if you go back to his Liverpool and City, like that Liverpool game, it was Fred v. the rest. And, he is supposed to got the best out of him. But Fred and McTominay were also the basis of that midfield that finished second in the league by Mourinho's, and I know it was tongue-in-cheek, right? Own admission, that was his best achievement. But that centre midfield pairing finished above Liverpool. It finished above everybody but City. So it's very easy to go back and say they're not good enough, right? Now, not good enough for what? To win a league title? Probably, right? But are Jordan Henderson and Curtis Jones better than McTominay and Fred? I don't think so, right? So to me, it's a different question about whether saying they're not good enough to win the league. Maybe, probably not, right? But that's not Solskjaer's fault. Solskjaer asked for Bellingham and he asked for Holland. Where are they?
So what about Paul Pogba then, who's been consistent throughout his time at Man United? Why wasn't he benched and given Donny van der Beek a chance instead?
Because he's a personification of the problem at Manchester United. So Paul Pogba should have been sold. But because Paul Pogba is worth so much to Manchester United commercially, he's not. And once he's in the squad, you have to play him, right? Now, he got dropped, right? He was dropped for games, really the last 4 or 5 games he got dropped, right? But again, first of all, just because Pogba gets dropped doesn't mean that Donny van der Beek's entitled to a chance, right? Donny van der Beek has to take his chance when he was given. That's the first time I've seen him take a chance, right? This is the biggest football club in the world. You don't have another go, son. Have another go. Have another go, right? You have to, first of all, we see games. We don't see training. Training is where you earn your place if you're not in the team, because you can't get it on a Saturday. You're not playing. So you have to do it in training. You have to show your attitude in training. You have to show quality in training. I don't believe for one single moment, if Donny van der Beek was, why would Solskjaer single him out personally? What's in it for him? If Donny van der Beek was showing the level of performance that Solskjaer wanted to, he'd be playing. Now, I would drop Fernandes. Personally, I think he's been too loyal to certain people that have let him down, right? So I would drop Fernandes, right? He's been dreadful. I think he gave up on Solskjaer about a month ago. You know, the irony of him pointing towards the fans, don't boo him, boo us. Well, why don't you put it right on the field? Remember that Liverpool game? Missed a sitter first couple of minutes. Missed a penalty against West Ham, right? Which the weekend cost a goal, right? Missed a great opportunity when the ball was pulled back in at key moments, right? So, you know, Solskjaer didn't get sent off against Watford. Solskjaer didn't get sent off against Liverpool. Solskjaer wasn't the one that missed the penalty. Solskjaer wasn't the one that couldn't run back like Wan-Bissaka. Solskjaer wasn't the one that missed gilt edge opportunities at the weekend. I know he's responsible for certain things, but this myopia that he's responsible for everything, people never learn. The only thing that's been consistent since 2013 are the people above Solskjaer. And we are in exactly the same situation we were in when Ferguson left. We are miles away from winning a European Cup, still miles away. Now that takes incredible incompetence to spend circa a billion, and still be miles off, right? The idea that this is an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer problem and just fixing Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is going to cause is just astonishingly stupid to me. And I'll tell you something, Kyle. What Solskjaer did, forget about Solskjaer for a minute. What happened against Liverpool? I don't care if you get a caretaker manager 5 minutes before that game starts, who doesn't have the time to implement a tactical game plan. You do the things that are the bare minimum that you expect from a footballer. Because one of the things we used to hear quite a bit before Liverpool games was form goes out the window. Why? Because they're blood and thunder. Players go out flying in the tackles, are desperate to win. Forget about your manager. What about yourself as a footballer? What about your own personal pride and self-respect? Where was that? They walked through that game. That's got nothing to do with Solskjaer. That's got to do with them. Petulant children. I'm not playing.
Well, I have to agree with you. I think Harry Maguire has been a disgrace this season.
Absolute disgrace.
And he should be stripped of the captaincy by the new manager.
100%.
Solskjaer was too loyal to him. Even give him a low 5 after he was sent off against Watford. I wouldn't have been even looking at him. Fernandes, like you say, has been really poor in the last couple of months. He should have been dropped. He's too loyal to people like Lindelof as well. You know, he's not good enough for Manchester United. You find Wan-Bissaka, he's been terrible this season. Brand McTominay.
To be honest, I would disagree with you on Lindelof. Right? I don't know what else he's supposed to do with Varane's injured. He has to play him, right? And to me, Lindelof better than Maguire. I'll play Lindelof before I play Maguire. And in all honesty, the best centre-back pairing is Varane and Lindelof, not Varane Maguire.
Against young boys, the game which we lost, capitulated. And then when we were down to 10 men, Solskjaer started Lindelof in that game when Varane was available and left Varane on the bench. Why did he do that?
Because of the same reason why he's not available now, because he wasn't 100%. And now you risk doing exactly. See, this is the problem. See, he gets criticized, and I said this before Watford, he get criticized if he changes the squad, and he criticized if he doesn't change the squad, right? So last season, they had an issue with Cavani allegedly picking his game, saying he's not fit, he's fit. Right? Disagreements with the medical staff over whether someone's fit. He rushes Varane back, he gets injured, and then he gets slaughtered. Right? Same with Luke Shaw. Right? Brings him back too early, they get injured, they get slaughtered. So for me, I think in Solskjaer's defense, Solskjaer's not a doctor. So Solskjaer gets told by both the player and his medical staff whether someone's available or not, or whether they're not, or whether it should be, or how long, what have you, right? So in a game against young boys, right, where United they're away from home, and they need to, they're in the Champions League, it's an important competition. He done what almost every manager in the world does. They take a gamble on their best players, on their fitness, right? Or if they don't feel that they should be gambled on, they rest them. So we're talking about Lindelof and Maguire, that was centre-back pairing all of last season. So you should be able to trust them away, young boys, right? And if he can't, neither of them should be at the football club. But, you know, it's to me like there's criticisms of players that are too lazy. Lindelof. What's Lindelof done wrong?
He's not good enough.
Okay, well, you cannot make that argument that he's not good enough based on what analysis. What is he like?
He gets turned too easily.
Who doesn't get turned? What defense don't do? I mean, I don't know. That's something that happens to every defender. Does it happen to him more often than that than everyone else?
He's a centre back and he's not good in the air. He's beaten far too easily. He's too slow. So I don't mean this to be facetious. You think that Victor Lindelof lacks all the basics of a centre back, but has somehow managed to play for Manchester United in this country? Do you think he's good enough to be a Manchester United centre?
Well, that's a different good. I would say that I don't think I think that he, like every defender, has a weakness. I don't know any human being, any defender doesn't have a weakness. Virgil van Dijk has weaknesses, right? So I think he can be bullied. But again, whether he's good enough, if you look at United's best defender, I would say is Varane. I would trust Varane and Lindelof before I trust Varane and Maguire. Maguire, what I saw against Leicester was an embarrassment to anyone calling themselves a professional. And what I've seen since then, I have a question mark about his mentality. And he's slow. You talk about a player who gets turned easily, can't play it from the back. United get beaten set pieces constantly. I'm struggling. You were talking about identifying negatives. I'm struggling to really identify strong positives about Maguire, right? But it's also a reflection of the fact that there isn't a lot of quality centre backs out there anymore because the way people play defence is changing. They don't want defenders anymore. They want ball playing centre backs, right? And so they have zonal marking, so they're not having man-on-man to man marking anymore, right? So the way these players are changing. Because if there was a quality available centre backs, United would have signed them. I don't think there's a lot of teams out there with a better centre back 2 than Lindelof and Varane, right? Now I don't think Lindelof's top quality, but they go through all of Europe's top teams. Does Real Madrid have top quality centre backs? Barcelona? Does Arsenal? Does Chelsea?
Chelsea are top of the league.
What do they have quality centre backs?
They're doing well.
Thiago, but it doesn't matter. That's not what I asked you.
They coach well. They keep clean sheets.
Different question, right? So we're both conceding that Solskjaer, right, isn't, and certainly on the evidence that we've seen. I mean, you take a look at last season. Solskjaer finished above Tuchel, finished above Chelsea. So clearly United were coached well last season. You don't finish second by accident. And it's a ridiculous argument to say, yeah, I know you finished second by accident, but those other coaches that finished below you, they're exceptional. They didn't finish. They finished third and fourth because they're exceptional, but you finished second because it's by accident. It's ridiculous. To me, you want to criticize Solskjaer, criticize him, but keep it realistic because there's lots of areas you can criticize him. People don't need to reach for hyperbole. He's the worst coach in the league. I can't deal with that. That is a level of petulance. I can't. If someone wants to take me there on an argument, I hang up because that's ridiculous to me. That's polemic. Look, if you want to criticize them, there's lots of legitimate reasons to do so. But when you reach for hyperbole like that, it's silly. It's like a little child. It tells me you lack the ability to evaluate him properly, other than he's shit.
Yeah, well, he's obviously improved. Largely his signings have been good. He's got us to a better place than we were in December 2018.
100%.
Ultimately, he's not the man to take us to the next level.
So let me ask you this, Kel. Do you think that the sole reason why United have failed is Solskjaer, and if they remove him and bring in a top class manager, United will be back being successful again?
No.
Okay, so it's not. So in the final analysis, there's much more going on than just a manager who's not quite at the top level yet, or may never be. Because I think that's a fair analysis.
I would say that it might be a stretch to say that he's just below top level. I don't think he's anywhere near that, in my opinion. I think he was a good interim manager. I don't think he should have been given the job permanently.
So how do you think he finished second, mate? How do you think he got the best away record in the history of the Premier League?
What? How dreadful the home record was?
No, that's a different question. That's a deflection. You can say, well, that's bad. I'm asking you because we've accepted the reason why he doesn't have the home record is because, in your opinion, he's nowhere near good enough. So I'm asking you, how do you justify and how do you explain the fact that he has the best away record in the history of the Premier League and he finished second? By Mourinho's own admission, his greatest ever achievement. How did someone who's completely inept do that?
I'm not saying he's completely inept. But
well, he's nowhere near top level. How did he do that?
Well,
Why didn't Tuchel do it last season? Why didn't Klopp do it last season?
I'll give you a couple of possible reasons. One being that for the majority of that period, the games were being played in training ground atmospheres. There was no.
So what? So that was just something that only affected United.
No, but
okay. So then it's all level. That's not a reason because that affected everyone equal.
Solskjaer's style is counter-attacking football, and it's playing away.
But he wasn't playing counter-attacking football since he signed Fernandes. I mean, take a look at the season. Take a look at last season. United dominated possession in 78% of the games. So he wasn't playing counter-attacking football once he signed Fernandes. But I still don't understand what that's got to do with his record.
What I will have to say is that in the last 3 years, United have had a lot of peaks and troughs, a lot of good runs of form, and then a lot of downturns. He's nearly been sacked quite a few times. Just before Fernandes came in, United lost at home to Burnley, which was.
I remember. But then once the club supported him and gave him the players that he needed, right? Because let's be honest, right? The greatest coach in the world, allegedly, who won all these trophies, was nowhere near. And his reasoning was the player, which he's right. So again, once Solskjaer got the players to play a certain way, was it luck? Yeah, but Solskjaer has how many semi-finals has he lost? But listen, I'm asking you, was it luck that caused him to have the best away? You don't need to demonstrate his failures because you've already accepted that he wasn't good enough, so that would be commensurate with that. What I'm saying is, how do you do the anomalies of his success? How did he finish second? Now, we used to have sayings like the league table never lies, right? And we used to have saying things like over the course of 38 games, the league will reflect exactly where you were. So clearly, other than Guardiola, last season, he was the second best manager in the league. That is irrefutable. And if there's anyone else doing it, we'd exceed that point. So what I'm saying is, high on earth, over 38 games did he do the double against City. High on earth, over 38 games did he end up with the best away record in the Premier League. In the history of the Premier League, high on earth, over 38 games did he turn around and finish second by Mourinho's own admission, his greatest achievement. By the way, he completely overhauled the squad. Right? He brought in quality players. He brings in youth, which, by the way, he's the only manager that has to play in a certain amount of youth players, and he hasn't. It's not enough to win. He has to win playing a certain way. Somehow, City, when they need a player, it's perfectly understandable to say you need a £150 million striker. Now, if that wasn't Solskjaer, why aren't you promoting Charlie McNeil from the youth team and winning that way? So he's held to a purity standard that nobody else is. That's a fact, 100% fact. So you can't turn around and say all his successes are luck and all his failures are down to his ineptitude. My opinion. You sound like Solskjaer's defense attorney. No, I'm pointing out the legitimate issues. I mean, if people want to be so myopic as, those successes down to someone else, those failures are all his, then you can't expect to be treated objectively in an argument because you're so myopic into. See, there's no balance. Once people are that way or this way, either way, whether you're all in for Solskjaer or all out, then your argument is irrelevant because you're unwilling to accept factual discussions that are counterfactual to your discussion. Solskjaer didn't finish second by accident. He didn't have the best away record in the Premier League, in the history of the Premier League, by accident. If Jurgen Klopp done that, we'd be lauding him, okay? Remember the mess United were in. So it's ridiculous to turn around and say, I know he did this, but that was all this kind of luck. Anyone could have done that, but those failures, that's because you're an idiot. By people who have never worked a single day in their life at any even semi-professional level, telling them that his game management's shade, his subs are shade, his tactics are shade. What? I mean, you can turn around and say the outcomes are shade, but I'm reading journalists evaluating from the Athletic, evaluating Solskjaer's tactical nous. The fuck are you? Football manager champion? I mean, this is like me telling Marvin Hagler how to throw a punch. Paul, you can turn around and say he lost, he wasn't good enough in the fight, but what you can't do is critique his technique because you don't know what you're talking about. And this is my problem with Solskjaer.
You're obviously referring to Carl Anker there, yes?
No, I'm not. Honestly, no, I'm just talking in general. Because first of all, I find the vast. I know people work athletic and I like them, but I find a lot of their content to be extremely snarky, as if they're somehow holier than thou and they're better than everyone else and they know more than everyone else. You know, it's almost a resignation. Like, Jesus Christ, am I going to have to teach these people football? That's what I sense from their coverage. Man, here's the thing, right? I've accepted the last few weeks Solskjaer needed to go 100%, right? And I was never completely sold either way. I completely understood why United gave him the job. Think about this for a second. Imagine United employed Cantona as an interim manager, right? And Cantona comes in the next 15 games, United play swashbuckling football, front foot, battering teams, exceptional. You're telling me there wouldn't be a fucking clamor all over the place for people to get Cantona that job? Absolutely. Because the one thing that gets forgotten in all of this years later is the contrast between Mourinho and Solskjaer. It couldn't possibly have been greater. So when you demonstrate an aptitude to do the job, right? I know what your resume says, right? And for some reason, we live in an era where past failures define you. Everybody has to fail. Everybody. All right? There's no route to success without failure. Ferguson, by default, technically is a failed St. Mirren manager. He was sacked by St. Mirren. So what? Right? And somehow, he's a failed Cardiff manager. How long do you think Pochettino will be before he's a failed Spurs manager when he starts losing a couple of games? And by the way, does Pochettino look like someone that's offended by defeat or failure? No. Pochettino is a coach, not a manager. There's a big difference. Secondly, right, when you're talking about Solskjaer, and it's really, really hard to get balance because the loudest voices on the internet are the biggest arseholes that haven't, and they don't, they're sitting here talking about Solskjaer and they're playing to a gallery. Unfortunately, United, being a massive football club, are infested with arseholes, and I mean arseholes. You see these arseholes that want United to lose, you're not a Manchester United fan. You can't be, right? And if you are a grown man and you want this football club to lose so your favorite guy can be in the job, all I want United to do is win. I don't care who sits in the job. But if you only want United to win when your favorite guy's in the job, you're not a Manchester United fan. And we have nothing in common. Because I've never felt that. I've never felt, I don't want him to lose. Never. Because more than anything, more than I'm a fan of the manager, more than a fan of the player, I'm a fan of the football club.
Yeah, well, his away record is no doubt commendable, and can we take away from it?
Commendable, it's exceptional.
But unfortunately, it doesn't get you any trophies on the mantelpiece.
But that's not the point, Kyle. The point is, it's a refutation of the ridiculous argument that he's inept. These are not minor anomalies. These are major things. No one else could do that. It's extremely difficult.
How can he be so good away from home, yet he's only taken, like, the Premier League's been around for 30 years. He's been United manager for 3 years. He's responsible for 21% of United's defeats at Old Trafford in the Premier League era. So
he's also responsible for all those wins then. Yeah,
but how can his away record be so good and his home record be so bad?
Well, I mean, we're sitting here arguing the point. I mean, this is we've seen this before where teams struggle at home because the fans are on their back, because the pressure, because teams sit in deep against them, because they have different game plans, right? And there's no question there's a mentality issue at United. There's not enough winners. There's not enough people that are desperate to win. There's too many. This is what happens when you give players contracts that don't deserve them. When you want to protect resale value, then you make the manager impotent because they don't fear the manager. You can't sell me. All right. Paul Pogba, case in point. If you'd have went to United in the summer and said, I want him out of here for 20 million, they wouldn't have sold him. You're stuck with him. Okay. Don't happen to Chelsea. Chelsea can afford to kick you out. Don't happen to City. They can afford to kick you out. All right. United, that's a business. You don't get that. Now, Chelsea can afford to do it, but they don't always give you that free rein to do that. And when you take that, usurp that power away from a manager, like it happened to Pochettino with Spurs, they're a coach. They're not a manager. And if your boss can't fire you, you don't respect your boss's authority. So the problem is, when you're a club like Manchester United, right? This never happened under Ferguson for lots of different reasons, not different football clubs. And the idea that some guy's going to come in and fix all this unless that they're given the ability to do so is outrageous, right? So this Solskjaer, in my opinion, done an outstanding job up until the end of last season. Right, bottom line, I don't think that Manchester United team the last 3 years would have won the league if they just had a better manager. No fucking chance. Now, miles behind City and Liverpool, miles. So the fact is, what Solskjaer ended up doing with United, a couple of top 4 finishes, is about all you realistically could have expected from that team. Because they're not good enough. And Solskjaer didn't send them to love. Mourinho did.
Why?
But Solskjaer got the best out of him.
Why, when United signed Ronaldo, Varane, and Sancho, was there a total collapse? Why did United?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. We're all asking that question. Solskjaer's asking that question, right? Why did United go backwards after signing these players, right? Sancho hasn't settled, hasn't showed anywhere near the form. Varane has been okay. Ronaldo's been okay. He's been good. But the real issue isn't those 3, it's the rest of them. What happened to Luke Shaw? What happened to Harry Maguire? These players have to take responsibility. They're not being told to do anything different that they weren't being told in the previous season. Right? At the end of the day, Kyle, you work for a company. You can't make human beings do certain things. You can only advise. Coaches are about teaching people good habits. But the essence is taught on your own. Right? I coach kids. And I tell them every time, all I can do is advise you and give you direction. But if you aren't willing to do all the things that you need to do to improve, I don't care. I can't help you. Solskjaer is in control of so little of these players. These players are... Cristiano Ronaldo would have been the best player in the world if he'd have played for Malacans. Because he was desperate to be the best player in the world. Right? That's him. So... Harry Maguire would be Harry Maguire where was at Manchester United or Leicester, because this is what you get. This is about them as professionals. At a club like United, you are given every resource to be the best player in the world. Whether you use them or not, it's up to you. Most players can't. Small percentage of Roy Keane's. There's a small percentage of Cristiano Ronaldo's. Most players aren't like that. So he is responsible to a point, but so are they.
Roy Keane did say on Sky that these players threw Mourinho under the bus, and they'll do the exact same thing to Solskjaer. So whoever the new guy is, there's certain people who have to be extracted from the squad. The likes of Pogba and Maguire, I would say as well. Maguire has really started to irritate me in recent weeks. That celebration against Albania really winded me up.
Well, perfect example. A guy who's let his manager down over and over and over again goes, puts his fingers in his ear playing for another team. Do tell me how that does anything for Solskjaer. Against Albania, by the way, Kyle, mate, personification of the problem of Manchester United right there. Our babies, little wimps. Look, Solskjaer takes responsibility in the sense that, one, whether he signed them or not, they're his players. They're in that dressing room because he chose them to be there, right? Because he's had ample opportunity to get rid of them if they didn't want to be there. Two, if they let him down, he chose the people to trust, right? Take that up with a player. Third, there's enough to sack Solskjaer on the way United play, the lack of any type of cohesion, the lack of any type of game plan, the disjointed nonsense. It was impossible. United would have been completely derelict in their duty if they allowed this to continue after Watford. They had to sack him, and they didn't want to, and I completely understand why. I said, had they have signed the best defensive midfielder in the world, it'd still look exactly like they do now, because this isn't about the personnel that's available to them in terms of their quality. They had to make a change. It was the right thing to do. But I'm telling you, Pochettino is risk for all the wrong reasons. But mate, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to love you and leave you because I gotta do my own podcast here.